Hello, hello, hello. I am embarking on a new experiment. And this one's not sponsored by Harvard. It's Yale this time. I will be uprooting my life just to move 5 miles. Why? To fully reorganize my life around sociality, around friendship, in pursuit of the elusive sense of community in our fractured world. And not only am I organizing my life around friendship, I am organizing my pillows around friendship too, because of Marlowe, a pillow brand from Brooklinen that is sponsoring this portion of today's video. Usually when I have friends come stay with me in Seattle, I just have one guest pillow to offer them. So if that pillow doesn't happen to be the perfect firmness or softness for them, or kind of SOL. But Marlowe enables me to accommodate my friends' unique preferences a lot more because their pillows are built to be adjustable. So my friends can zip them up for a firmer pillow or unzip them for added plushness. And they're made with cooling memory foam if they're sensitive that way too. So if you want to be the kind of person that gives their friends more free will over their sleeping options, Marlowe's actually having a summer sale through July 5th where you can get up to 30% off plus an additional 20% off when you use my link, which is in the description. They also have a 365-day free return policy and a 2-year warranty if that helps you sleep easier at night. Be better to your friends in bed. That's my advice. Trial patient number 1. She's out like a light. All right, let's wake back up to the rest of the video. This decision to pack everything up was actually a very unlikely turn of events for me, and a very sudden one at that. I can very specifically date this course of action back to March 20th of 2023. My mom that day had sent me, and I remember this, had sent me a housing post that she had seen for a very cute apartment in a different neighborhood than the one I'm living in now, to which I responded with something like, "Aw, thanks, but I'm really looking to stay in my neighborhood." At that point, I was very settled in my little carpeted 1-bedroom home that I originally wrote off when I first toured it, but have since come to feel just like so attached to. And after almost 2 years in this place, I was just starting to get to a very secure place. Like, I was at the phase of trust with my neighbors where they offered to lend me tools or save my mail when I was out of town. And at this point, I know all of my bus stops and the go-to restaurants and the cutest parks around me, the right timing to jaywalk across my street. I had some resolve that I'd found the right spot for me and that I'd be staying here for a while longer. And on March 20th, at least, I genuinely felt that way. But by April 2nd, I was making a TikTok telling a million people that I'd had a change of heart and I'd be moving. So if you or anyone you know is moving out of their apartment in Seattle this summer, let me know so I can make my dream come true, and then I'll talk about it on my YouTube channel and we'll experiment. What exactly, you may be asking yourself if you've already forgotten the title of the video you clicked on, could have prompted this 12-day transformation of mine? Well, literally 4 articles. 4 articles that the algorithm fed me and I ate right up and digested fast. And let it be known, usually, I'm a slow eater when it comes to big life changes. I'll chew on those forever. So that speaks to just how flavorful these pieces of media must have been. The first was a Substack piece by Priya Rose. The second, an Atlantic article by Adrian Mattei. The third, a Substack from none other than Anne Helen Peterson. And the fourth, another Atlantic article by Raina Cohen. So let's nibble on those before I show you the home-cooked meal I came up with after tasting their appetizers. Priya's piece was the first one I came across and was actually DM'd to me, and it details her firsthand account of how she managed to convince 22 of her friends to move within walking distance of her over the course of 15 months. Super practical outline of her strategy. It included socializing and mixing her friends together at ritualized weekly dinner parties that she hosted at her place to introduce everyone not only to her neighborhood, but to each other and start to familiarize them. She would offer subleases for a month or 2 at a time. She would keep her eye out for like housing, signage, and new units available. And then she also made friends in her building and looped them in. It basically was like a recreation of college housing, that mythical walkable community we all lament we don't have. And seeing the very concrete steps that she and her husband took to get there was inspiring, but it was also very intimidating for me. Adrian's piece came out in March and was super succinct and asked some really familiar questions to me, like, wouldn't it be great to have someone who could join me on a stroll at a moment's notice, or to be able to drop by to cook dinner for a friend and her baby? How good would it be to have more spontaneous hangs instead of ones that had to be planned, scheduled, and most likely rescheduled weeks in advance? And it also offered some very compelling statistics, like friends living within a mile of each other are 25% more likely to feel happy, and their friends have a 10% chance of feeling happier too. I read both of these essays and felt the opposite of disheartened, which is heartened, but heartened doesn't feel like a real word, even though it should be. So I felt heartened, and then when I got to Anne Helen Peterson's contribution to the theme, my constitution of renewing my lease here started to feel like it was on shaky ground. And that just points to how much I admire her work and have come to admire her work in the past few years. I really feel like the topics she picks deeply resonate with me, and we seem to have just a lot of shared values. So once I saw her take a stab at this field, I knew I was done for. I was actually like scared I would be convinced, because I did not want to be. She really examines why we haven't all done this already. Like, there may be some of you watching, like, this is all so sensible, I don't understand why this merits so much of our collective consciousness. But the truth is, like, there are so many barriers and reasons why we haven't just all already done this. And she lays out the beliefs and fears and material factors that hold us back. First off, like, we're not socialized culturally to prioritize friendship in a way that justifies moving your whole life to be closer to them. Like, it's very available that many people orient their lives around their careers or their marriages, but somehow moving cities or moving neighborhoods just to be that much closer to a friend is a little kooky. Another reason she points to is that friends are just so scattered. And I experienced this. Like, I've opened up about this several times on my channel. Like, I would say most of my friendships are long distance friendships. Most of my rich friendships are long distance friendships. 80, maybe even 85% of my friendships are long distance. I just wonder, like, is it odd to have more friends in like LA or New York than the city you live in? Because I'm like, that's a little odd. I feel like most people, the most people they know is in the city they live. For me, I'm like, no. Which just seems so ass backwards, but it's a product of the way that I've befriended people, which has been majority online. Also, just that, at least in the US, this is something I spoke about on TikTok, and I think is relevant, we should be talking about more, is that the US has too many cities. Like, just literally too many options of where to live. Okay, call me crazy, but I think us Americans would be a lot less lonely if the United States were smaller. Like, I'm talking about like 2 to 3 major cities. Because I have this friend in Australia, and there, if you're like in your mid-20s, the cities to live in: Sydney, Melbourne, whatever the hell you want to call it. She grew up in Sydney, and when she was moving to Melbourne, she was kind of upset because she was like, I actually know a good amount of people there, and I want to start fresh, but I can't, because like, no matter where I go, there's just people that I know, because there's only 2 cities to choose between here. Versus in the US with 50 states, and because of the internet, I know people in like Atlanta, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, Seattle, like DC, New York. So it's starting to feel like no matter what, unless I convince every last person to move to the same city, we are going to be long distance relationally, which is still a very texturally rich relationship, but there's only so much FaceTimes can do to quell loneliness. It makes the prospect of trying to gather all those people in one location too large scale to even consider. And then there's the housing market, of course, which is deeply functional thanks to capitalism's insistence on shelter being a commodity, and makes it just that much harder to even find a place to live. Like, there is a lot of housing scarcity and insecurity out there, and a general lack of control over where we move, and a lack of density as well. Like, you might not have a place in mind where 20 people can live within 5 minutes of each other, like you could in a college dorm. There's job lock, she also presents, where job mobility isn't plentiful enough to allow you to transfer your life to a new place. and plenty more roadblocks where that came from, which you should read about in the article and read the other pieces for that matter. And going down the line that way and seeing all of the challenges did feel sort of disabling, but in other ways, I am in a fortunate position where I'm not experiencing job lock. My friends that I do have in Seattle are already living in a dense neighborhood, and I've already recalibrated my value system over the last few years to prioritize friendship. So I feel like I've put myself in the best position I could have to be the right candidate for this. And then I got to the end of her piece where she sinks the line into you that I also think it's worth thinking about the stories we tell ourselves, the excuses we embroider when it comes to not doing the things we'd really like to do. And that spoke to me. She wrote that for me. I'm in a parasocial relationship with a woman, but she had me in mind because, first of all, I embroider, so I appreciated that imagery. And second of all, I hate apathy and I hate like being a nihilist and feeling like I can't prefigure the world I want to live in. That's a piece of how I identify. So when she tapped into that, it was at that moment that, you know, my jaywalking familiarity in my neighborhood and my bus stop knowledge and the tools my neighbors let me borrow and my restaurant choice and park preference, they didn't feel as substantive in terms of reasons to stay here. For 2 years in my neighborhood, I have worked at building friendships in my area. Like I tried to find a spiritual community. I found a gym. I worked at a retail shop and tried socializing that way. I just showed up in my neighborhood, but no one showed up for me. Like I've met friends over the last 2 years, and I feel very accomplished that I even know anyone in this city after moving here and not having that. But I was trying to back into the solution to this problem because the truth is I don't have a single friend that lives in my neighborhood. They all live 5 miles away. Why would I not choose that? Why would I not choose that? And that's a rhetorical question of why would I not choose that? But I'll answer it. Like I had reasons, I had resistance for choosing that. And I fought the move. I did not want to be persuaded to apartment hunt just to be closer to my friends. I had a hard time accepting it, even with these very motivating articles, because where I live right now, I love. Like I genuinely feel like I belong here. I'm close to bike trails, which is a hobby I feel so free doing. It's residential, but it's walkable, so it's not super gray and urban around me. And it's very charming, you know? It has a lot of character, and that resonates with me. And I also have this complex about being a free thinker and resisting living where everyone lives because maybe I would forego some of my individuality. American individualism strikes again. Psychically, I feel like places have personalities, and this personality is like, the personality of this neighborhood is very compatible with me. I'll just say that. So I didn't want to just shack up with this other neighborhood whose personality seems to jive with like everyone else. And also, importantly, this would just be a new strategy for me. Like I've never picked housing based on friends. I've only ever picked housing based on practicality of proximity to errands or to work. But reading these articles, and the fourth one, which I didn't mention, was Raina Cohen's piece, less about moving closer to your friends and more about advocating for a total reconfiguration of friendship and commitment and value. Reading these pieces what they did for me was allow me to enter into a more good faith space of evaluating the possibility and find the reasons to do it. The first one being like, is the quality of life bump that I would get from running into friends on the street, more impulsive hangouts, will that make up for the added quality of life I feel from being in a neighborhood that I adore so much? March was also a transitional time for me. My sister had unexpectedly moved out of Washington State in January, and I found myself suddenly without that like familial support here. And she only lived 5 minutes away from me. So now that she's gone, my roots to this place are a little shallower. Like, she would be the one that came over to water my plants, help me mount things and hang up shelves. I could borrow her car. And without her, I suddenly realized the friends I have to call on for things like that are just further away, and it's not as convenient. And like, I need that chosen family. Like, we need that community. I also moved here with a car and then very soon thereafter totaled it and have been living as a pedestrian ever since. And where I chose to live is not the best public transit option. It's decent, but I could be living in a place that's much more accessible, and that just like makes more sense for my lifestyle when I think about it. There's also more park access in other neighborhoods. So after mulling those reasons over and after going through that 4-essay sequence, I wanted to do what the headlines told me to. Imagine that. Art and literature shifting minds, hearts, and spirits. Let this be a reminder that if there's something you've been meaning to create, to write, to paint, do it, because you do not know who you could impact for the better. And to seal my choice, I decided to publish it to an undeterminable audience on TikTok. And I actually like put out a request. I put out a call for help with like, have any of you done this? How has it affected your life? I want to know. Can you help close me on this further? I want to be like all in. And I asked for people to stitch and comment if they had made similar jumps for their friends. And I'll share a few of those here because I just didn't have like a lot of stories in my world, in my personal real life world of people operating this way. At least hearing those individual shares was affirming and encouraging. So the plan is, when my lease is up in July, I will be signing a lease somewhere within a 15 to 20 minute walk of 4 or 5 of my friends here. I want to experiment. It only has to be a year. That's what I told myself when I moved to Seattle in the first place. Do it. If you hate it, you can always move back. And now I can barely imagine myself going back to California. So if I follow that thread through, I don't think this will be a mistake. I can't imagine I'll regret this. Revolving my life completely around friendship doesn't seem absurd to me at all. In fact, it actually feels like doubling down on something that is going to pay dividends and has never been a mistake ever in the history of man. I want to see people I know every day. Like, I have found myself in this position where I live alone and I work alone, and it's not enough for me. I can't feasibly expect to see the people I know and love when it takes me 45 minutes to get to them. So I would like to invite you to join me in this experiment, my fellow free-thinking friend-havers. If you do, please report back to me. And if you already have embarked on a version of this experiment, please comment below your findings, as I will be reporting back on my progress as I go. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time, and Katherout.